Wow. You're a straight up friendship gangster. Were you always, obviously you couldn't have been.
No.
How did you become this person who's so direct in your friendships?
Like, you can love them for the moment that they were, and they don't have to last forever for them to still be beautiful. And I still love this person, but in a different way. There is a cost to making more friends in that you tend to have less intimacy with each of them when you're spread so thin.
Can men and women be friends? Welcome to Halfway Done, the show about how we turn the bad things into the good. I'm Andy Dunn, and today we're diving into something nobody really talks about, which is the science of friendship and why it is so goddamn hard to make friends. So we grow up assuming friendships just happen. You meet people, you vibe, and boom, you're friends for life, right? Not so much. Somewhere along the way, things get complicated. People drift, life gets busy, friendships fall apart, and suddenly making new friends feels harder than filing your taxes, which is coming up. That's where today's guest comes in. Dr. Marissa Franco is a psychologist, a professor, the New York Times bestselling author of the book Platonic, which changed my life and informed so much about what we're doing at Pi. And it is a book about the science of friendship and human connection. Basically, if you've ever wondered why making friends as an adult is like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded, she's got the answers. Let's welcome Marissa. Cool. So let's jump right into it. Tell us about a time where a friendship of yours fell apart.
Oh, man. I know we're getting deep from the beginning. So I guess I had this friend who I would call a work wife. We hung out every day. We would go for walks together. It's like that person you're able to have the real conversation with where you're like, yeah, I felt like that was kind of weird. And thank you for validating that. And we went on a trip to New York together. And I said something that I thought was benign, but it deeply triggered her. And I was encouraging her to try to talk to me, tell me how you're feeling. And she's like, I'm not ready. And when she was ready, all of this rage came out.
You said, I don't like your shoes or what?
I don't want to get specific because then it makes it identifying, unfortunately. So we'll have to lean into the mystery here. And so, she was kind of got very mean to me. And, there's just so much anger there. And I guess I wanted her to be communicative, but in a kind way, I'll say. And so then I had a lot of trouble because I was just I feel misunderstood. I feel like you're abandoning me, or my whole identity has changed in such a quick snap of a moment. And that is the nature of trauma, right? If you have previous traumas, they get imposed onto whatever cues in the current environment feel similar to them. So I could understand intellectually that was happening, but it still felt really hard for me to I don't know, be kind of the object of so much anger when I was going in trying to be benign. And so we tried to work through it, Andy. We showed up, we talked through it again, and we just couldn't, I think that the rupture was too deep, on both of our ends.
Just from that one moment?
Literally that one moment.
And how long had you been friends before that?
A year.
So it was kind of a new relationship.
New-ish, but based on the amount of time it sounds like that, but based on how it felt, it didn't feel like that,
Yeah.
I felt like this would be someone I'd be friends with forever. And now I would say we're friends. We're not close friends. We're not friends. She comes through the area, she moved away, and we still see each other, but I definitely feel less motivated to hang out, which maybe means I'm not fully over the rupture either. So
yeah.
Hard.
And I want to ask one more question about this, which is, how did you try to patch it up with her or to squash it?
Yeah.
And then when you look back on it, is there anything you would do differently after that comment happened?
Oh, man. I maybe would have expressed that, I want to talk through this, but, I have a need for it to be, a kind conversation and for us to still love each other even when we're upset with each other. I maybe would have expressed my need for that if I could have anticipated how much anger she had. I also just think sometimes things are ephemeral and they end, right? Yeah. And I think there's this way that, I think I have to accept that in a way. There's just some things that feel you can love them for the moment that they were, and they don't have to last forever for them to still be beautiful. And I still love this person, but in a different way.
So this, I think, is a beautiful topic. How do we fire our friends? Or what's the right way when a friendship isn't building for you, but maybe it's building for the other person?
Yeah.
To move on.
Well, I think the beautiful thing about friendship is like, there's so many levels of friendship. Whereas I feel like romantic relationships, it's experienced in a more dichotomized way. Like either I'm with you or I'm not. Like we're together or we're getting a divorce. And so friendship can be like, we were really close and now we're less close. And so it's my first question is, do you want to break up or do you want to be at a different level of intimacy? To me, I feel like I used to be like intimacy for everyone. But now I'm like, what's the right level of intimacy for a given person, right? And maybe that level of intimacy wasn't right for me and this friend, but a different level of intimacy is better. And, you know, that plays out over time. I think when you really prioritize someone, you welcome them to be in your most intimate space, right? Like, I'm going to show up for you. I'm going to reach out when you're going through something. You know, when you want to hang out with me, I'm going to try to make time for it. Whereas the people that are maybe lower in the closer circle, you're kind of like, well, when I get around to it, like when it works out. And so there's the subtle way that we insinuate it based off of like our level of prioritization of a person. But if someone really wants to be friends with you and you don't want to be friends with them at all, I recommend the awkward friendship breakup conversation.
And is that a text message sometimes? Or and let's say it is a text.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to call someone or sit down with someone. What might that text say? Or what has been a way that you've been able to do that?
I haven't done that. I've never had that done to me. Has anyone had that done to them?
Oh, I've done it.
Oh, you've done it. You've done it.
What did you say?
I handwrote a letter, and I just basically outlined what my grievances were and where I saw my life moving forward, and that I didn't see them as a part of that.
And did you once have a friend named Marissa in New York? And something happened at a lunch?
No, I haven't.
Is that why you're
Still
here?
not over that.
So any best practices for how to do it?
Okay, we were just talking about the ambivalent villain, and I love the ambivalent villain where you're like, you're part hero, you're a part villain. And I feel like that's so important to keep in mind in the breakup, that we tend to try to reduce people's identity to what they did to harm us and forget like the whole gamut of experiences we had along the way. And that harms us and them, because it's like, who wants to feel like we spent 5 years together and that was just a waste of my time, right?
Yeah.
And so being able to acknowledge, it's not working for me anymore because of these reasons, but I did really get this, this, and this. And I do want to acknowledge that we loved ourselves. We loved each other in these ways, like kind of moving towards ambivalence rather than trying to reduce the story of the friendship to, I don't know, have less dissonance over ending it.
Is it okay to just ghost one or two times before having the conversation? Or because typically what happens is you reach out to someone and they're busy.
Yeah.
Or they're slow to reply.
Yeah.
And then it happens maybe 2 or 3 times and you start to think, like I have this happening right now to me where I've made 2 bids.
Yeah.
And they both have been punted. And I'm kind of thinking, oh, I'm going to let this person be now.
Yeah.
He's busy. Maybe we don't have a thing. Is it okay to start with something indirect so that you're not being presumptuous about what their intentions are?
Yeah, I would say like if both parties are kind of fading, then it's okay to fade. It's just like when one person seems more invested, I think it's kinder to say something, because otherwise you trigger something called like ambiguous loss, which is when you have a loss and you don't know why, and so it's a lot more complicated to grieve the situation, and that's like what ghosting does for people. So that's why it's hard. And if I was I might be on the same, going through the same thing that you are. I'm not sure if people don't respond because they're busy or because they're fading. And friendship is so ambiguous, it's hard to know. But I feel like if it comes to that, I might bring that up and be like, hey, like haven't heard from you in a while. Like was just wondering if there's something on your mind. Would love to talk about it or put things on the table. Like, you know, if I'm misunderstanding the situation here, also like totally fine, but just love directness here.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And what about on the other side? Tell us about a time where you had a friendship that went through some fragility, some difficult times, and maybe it did get repaired. And how did that happen?
So I have my best friend, and we were in college together, and that was great. And we kind of like, I would say we evolved over time. Like, she's very like femme and very, you know, her nails are always done, her hair's always done. She's beautiful, and I am. And I felt like I'm like more of a tomboy, a very low maintenance. This is relevant because she says that she texts friends for things like, who's your favorite esthetician? And I'm like, I don't know what an esthetician is. So maybe this is why we are not reaching out to each other as much. And so I'm like invested in this friendship, but I feel like she's not putting in the time and energy, specifically when she gets into relationships. It feels like she's gone. She's like living in Miami with this guy. I haven't seen her in months, right? And I'm like trying to like hold on to the friendship. She teaches yoga at my gym. So I'd show up every Saturday to like just be able to spend time with her. And she loved me. And I knew that because on like big events, she would show up and, you know, she would get me all these gifts and stuff. But like the little things, we don't realize how those little things destroy relationships. Like I'm always the first one to reach out to you. You know, you don't really ask me about my day, or you don't even ask me to like hang out, you know, and it seems little, but it's the accumulation of little things that harms relationships even more so than the big blow-ups, I think. And so it all came to a hilt when she got into a new relationship, and I was finally honest with her, and I was like, hey, like sometimes I feel like you get into relationships and I don't see you, and I would just really love to see you more.
And you said that over a coffee, or that was...
I
texting?
said that that was over a text, and I was like, we can follow up when we're in person. So we did. And she was like, oh, I'm sorry. Thank you so much for this feedback. I want to make you feel loved. And so like, let's find some time to hang out together once a month. And I'm like, okay, great. Let's do that. It was so vulnerable to me to share that impacted me. It was very vulnerable. And I needed her to show up because now I felt even more vulnerable because I had voiced it. And like 2 months passed. It was the holidays. We had hung out and we agreed to hang out one-on-one. We had hung out maybe in a group one of those months. But I was just like, I really put myself out there and this is not making a change. And now I feel I'm so vulnerable that I'm ready to withdraw from one of the closest relationships of my life.
You said that to her.
I was thinking this.
Okay.
And it just felt so vulnerable to keep approaching the pain here. But I ended up, well, first of all, I was not showing up at her yoga class so she could kind of tell something was going on. So I couldn't just slink away.
That is some
quietly.
cold-blooded shit right there. Not showing up for yoga. Damn.
That's the extent of my evil side.
Vicious.
And so I was just like, okay, she's going to know something's going up. I have to bring this up. And so we're hanging out and I'm just like, I just break down crying. And I'm just like, man, friend, like, I feel like I've been trying so hard to stay close to you. I even hung out with her new boyfriend one-on-one to get to know him as a sign of investing in the friendship. I told her I'd been going to all these yoga classes and like, I asked for this one-on-one hang. It's still not happening. And if you feel like you don't want to be close to me anymore, just tell me, please just tell me, put me out of my misery.
Thinking that or saying it?
I said, I literally was like, if that's the situation, like, please just tell me, you know?
Wow.
And she was like, no, like not at all. And this was something revelatory that she told me. I focus on the relationship that brings me the most anxiety. And you don't bring me anxiety, so I'm not intentional about our relationship. And I was like, so your neglect is a sign of love and safety? Is that how it works?
Wow.
Anyway, so she showed up so well when she realized how it impacted me. And the truth was, at the first point, I thought I was vulnerable, but I wasn't because I didn't share the extent of the impact. And she needed to hear that to take action and to really understand the weight of what was happening here. And so I recommend full-bodied vulnerability, like not just like touching on it, but getting into like the deeper feelings about how the friendship is affecting you. And so then she says, like, send me a list of all your needs. So I literally wrote down the list of everything I wanted in the friendship.
Oh my gosh.
She really showed up. Yeah, after she realized
what was on the list?
Mistake. It was like, because we
front row at yoga.
We identify as best friends. So I said things like, I would love to like know your other friends. I feel like our relationship is kind of siloed. I feel like you water the friendship when it's like dried out, but like I'm a plant. I need watering all the time. I want you to just like text me every now and then just to like check in on me. We set up these monthly hangouts that are on the calendar, so everything else is prioritized around that. And the other thing we agreed upon was to enter into each other's distinct worlds. So she likes to do things that I associate with greater amounts of femininity. Like she was like flower making class. And I would not do that. That's not my personal interest. But we just decided we are going to do that for each other because we see the ways that we're different, but we still want to be invested. And so I went to that flower making class. And I like the flower making class because there was like all these tools to like cut the flowers. And so it was just very tactile. And then I realized when it comes to like friendship and life in general, I have to stop predicting and start experiencing, not think I know the story of myself. I know the story of what I like. I know who I'll get along with, but actually put myself in the experience and then ask myself retrospectively, what was that like for me? Because my identity is a lot more fluid and malleable than I thought in that moment.
Wow. It's funny you bring up flowers because our hotel has got a sign up that says where there are flowers, there is hope.
Wow.
So I was thinking about flowers, but I don't want to go to that class. But maybe I need a more expansive definition. Not that you were inviting me. There's something you said in that conversation about your friend, and she sounds amazing.
She is.
You said you hung out with her boyfriend one-on-one.
Yep.
In the difficult times. Tell us about how that hangout originated.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah.
And do you think that was accretive or detrimental to the friendship?
Both. So I was just like, it seems like you're really serious about him. And so I want to know him. Like, I don't want us to be split off in these two distinct worlds of here's my romantic partner, here's my friendship, because I think that's part of the problem here, really. And she was, and he seemed like someone who was actually nice and kind and she could see something long-term with. So me and him, we connect intellectually a lot. Like, he loves to read. We went to an author talk, and that was like really cool to experience. And I really did like him. But like, there was this moment where I was like, yeah, like, I guess what I was telling him, like, what me and her are working through is like, sometimes she like vanishes from friendship when she gets into romantic partnership. And he said, I don't think that's a problem. And I was like, oh no, it's going to happen again. So that like loomed large in my
What did he mean? Did you ask him what he meant by that?
I think,
or he just said it was natural that happens, or what?
I think for him, he doesn't have strong friendships because his family is where he finds that deep connection. And for him, like, shedding friendships means something very different than for me or her, because our friends are like our family. And so I think we were fundamentally miscommunicating on the nature of the question, is what I realized.
And on that friend-family concept, sometimes we talk about the early internet, back to our theme for this weekend of Fuck the Internet, and talk about MySpace. I don't know if y'all remember this, but MySpace used to have, like, your crew. How many friendships do you think we can hold that actually have a level of intimacy like the one that you're describing?
I do. It's hard to say because, like, it depends on what other priorities you have, right? Some people are married or have small kids, and some people don't. But I will say something I've definitely realized is there is a cost to making more friends, in that you tend to have less intimacy with each of them when you're spread so thin. And so when I wrote Platonic, I think I was like, I have to prove these concepts. I have to make a huge, circle of friends. And I did. And I was so much less happy because there was so much less intimacy that came with seeing a different person every day. And I realized I'd much rather see the same person each week than feel like I have this sprawling network that feels less intimate, less authentic to me.
That's awesome. And then what's the number?
I don't know.
What's the number for you?
I would say about 15 who live in my city.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're in the business of friendship, though, finally.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the quick thing on the boyfriend. I have to ask the Harry met Sally question, and I know it's a heteronormative question, but can men and women be friends?
Yeah, the assumption I think in the question is like, if you're attracted to a gender, can you just have like platonic love with them? Which the implications there is bisexual people can't be friends with anybody, right?
That's the way to go.
Yes.
Yeah. Shit.
Slate,
I missed half the boat, man. I missed half the boat.
You're just done.
But things can change. That's
I have friends that I am attracted to, and I almost think of it like, me and my friend talk about this, that like, it's like when you're at the bakery and you smell a cookie and you're like, I want to eat the cookie, but it's also beautiful to smell the cookie. And I can also appreciate just being far enough to smell the cookie, even if I'm not making contact. Yes. And so I have found that if you can see it as there's beauty in the feelings you stir in me, even if they don't end up in any sort of physical connection or formal romanticality, then it's a lot easier, I think.
And so let's say you're at the bakery and you're smelling some cookies. How do you know if the other person is smelling some cookies too? Or do you have any advice about the platonic to romantic Rubicon?
Oh my gosh.
That some of us cross in our lives and some don't.
It's high risk, high reward, right? Because who the heck wants to lose a friend that you really loved if it doesn't work out? But also, being friends with someone is one of the best predictors of how happy we are in a romantic relationship with them. And so if you already, like, I have dated people I wouldn't be friends with, and that was a bad idea. Like, if you're like, I wouldn't be friends with this person if we weren't dating, like, continue to move on.
Yeah.
And so then that way, if you're like, we are compatible as friends and we know that, and we are deciding to get into this romantic relationship, that is such a beautiful foundation.
Yeah, and I don't want to turn a conversation about platonic relationships into a romantic one, but I have one more question about it. What does need to be in common in those situations, you think, and what can be different?
in the situations where you want to turn it romantic.
Is it about shared things you love doing? Is it about how you navigate conflict? Is it a little bit of both? Any insights about that? What kinds of platonic friendship might be the kind that could transition to a romantic relationship?
Yeah. Well, what's the word? I think it's that we tend to look for friends with like shared values. And when you think about who would make like a good spouse, it's a lot of the qualities you would think for in your like closest friends, right? We have these similar values, similar like deep things are important to us. We can feel really authentic and genuine around each other, right? It's not necessarily like the fire and the passion, but it's these things that are just going to make us happy with each other, compatible with each other. I really think to love someone is to help them express the deep truth of who they are. And that's not from me originally. And that is like what friendship does. And I think that's what beautiful romance does. It's like, I'm a deeper version of myself because I know you. And so it's that piece that I think that portends a more beautiful transition between platonic and romantic.
That's cool. I'm going to get vulnerable for a second because I once had a conversation with my now wife when we were dating. We were in what I used to call a fight, but now I call a spirited disagreement. And usually I'm the one crying and she's not, but she was upset about something. And she said to me, I remember like we were in Boston, we were in a hotel room. And she says, we don't have the same values. And I don't think it was good what I did, which is I started laughing because compared to each other, we don't have the same values, but compared to the rest of the world, we do, which is to say like there is so much in common, but sometimes when we're close to someone, we can feel different. And my dad calls this the narcissism of small differences, right? Which is like, as Americans, we're at each other's throats right now, divisively, but we are so similar if you compare us to Egyptians. Or if you look at the most people that are killed by other people in warfare, it tends to be people who are so similar. You think about the conflict between Shia and Sunni Muslims or the conflict in Northern Ireland. We find a way to really be at odds with other people. What have you learned, and maybe we go back to platonic friendship, about how to find what we have in common?
Well, I think there's this way. So I know about myself, for example, I'm very high on intellectual curiosity. And sometimes that makes people's eyes glaze over. And sometimes they're like, all right, we don't need to get that deep here. But that sometimes makes me hide that part of me where I'm like, I actually like really want to engage in this deep idea with you. But I think we find out what we have in common when we're willing to share these pieces of ourselves that we feel scared to share because we're afraid of judgment. Because when someone says me too to those pieces of ourselves, it creates such a deep connection. Like there's this way that I remember in being in my class, one of my students was presenting this study that people that are more insecure can have deeper connections because when you share that insecurity or that part of your personality that you're like, okay, I love anime or whatever it is that I'm not sure everyone else likes, and someone else says me too, they are giving you something so valuable, right? They're giving you what we call a corrective experience as therapists, which means I've had the same negative experience over and over and over again, but you have shown me something different. And that makes me feel alive and that makes me feel safe. So I would say we figure out what we have in common by sharing parts of ourselves we're afraid to share.
I love that. Let's talk about curiosity for a second. What do we do when we're curious about someone and they're not curious about us?
It hurts.
Is that navigable, or is that maybe the death knell for that emerging bud of a relationship, friendship?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think there's my larger question is like, are they a less curious person or are they less curious with me? Because that is a very different state of affairs.
Wait, which one is worse? They both sound bad.
I know, they both sound bad. I think if they're like a less curious person, right, then it's like, it's not necessarily that they're not interested in you. It's just that that's not how they convey interest. And so I believe that we shouldn't try to be friends with people that don't want to be friends with us. But if they're not curious about you, that might not necessarily mean that they don't want to be friends with you. It's just how they operate in the world. But if they're generally curious or showing interest in people or being invested in people, but they're not doing that with you, and it's a sign that, you know, they maybe not be interested in you as a friend, I always say, like, if people don't like you, walk away, don't work harder. Because who wants to invite into their lives relationships that are one-sided, where you're not getting your needs met? And that's really what you're doing when you're pursuing relationships with people that aren't interested in building relationships with you. And now, of course, it takes a little bit of time to figure out if you're interested in each other. but if it's like more long standing.
Yeah, I had one of these dynamics once in my mid-20s. My friends started to date and get married, and I felt left behind. And I wasn't able to figure that out at that time in my life. I wasn't on that train. And I met with one of my best friends' girlfriends. And I was so hurt coming out of the conversation because I asked her 39 questions about her life and she asked me 0, that I came up with a term for it, which I still use, which is a lork. And a lork is lack of reciprocal questions.
Ooh.
If you spell it with a Q. And it's lack of reciprocal curiosity if you spell it with the C. And the jury's out. And then I thought about my own life and I thought, my friend is kind of like that too. But I still like him. Yeah. And when I look back and take inventory at that now, it's because he was better looking than me. I like to hang out with him because when we went out, we would meet more interesting people. Yeah. And I was like the remora fish by the shark. You know, I was like, you know what I'm talking about. And I just found him to be a compelling person, magnetic and so smart. And I felt affinity. You know, I felt reciprocal affinity, but he just wasn't the kind of person that was going to ask, how are you feeling and what's going on in your life? And I just saw him. Well, first of all, not to make this about me, but for a second, I told him not to marry that woman based on that reason. And they're now divorced. So what's up now? Sorry, but they have 2 beautiful kids. It's all good. And now we're still friends, 20 plus years later. And he's so different now. Wow. He is so curious and he's changed a lot. People evolve. So how do you decide when a friend is maybe static versus dynamic and not, coming back to your point, not pigeonhole them for who they are versus like, shit, this person's going to be an asshole. They're an asshole now and they're always going to be one. Any advice on that?
It's hard because I think everyone's dynamic if you wait long enough, but what's your capacity for waiting,
Couple decades. For you, I guess.
Yeah, a couple decades for you. So you, I think when it comes to first of all, I like to bring things up. So there might be room for dynamism that you don't know until you make the bid for it. And I'll often put that on myself. And I think that helps with people's egos, where I'll literally say sometimes I tend to really be in the listening role and ask a lot of questions. But I do really appreciate when people are curious about me. And sometimes I need that to be able to share a little bit more. And so is that something that you might be willing to do?
Wow. You're a straight up friendship gangster. Were you always, obviously you couldn't have been.
No.
How did you become this person who's so direct in your friendships?
I think I used to think that I used to be so bad at conflict because I thought it was my job to just get over it on my own. If I'm bringing it up, I'm being a burden, I'm being too much, right? All of those insecurities. And then I realized, honestly, I was reading some research that hey, people that bring up conflict empathically have more intimacy in their relationships. They're actually closer to people. And I was like, really? I'm actually harming my friendships by trying to keep everything hidden. And I could see that happening because I started wanting to withdraw from some of the closest relationships of my life because I wasn't bringing up problems. I could see the kind of harm that I was causing. And I realized that I think the reason I tried to escape those conflict or putting things out on the table is because I really associated conflict with throwing over the table or yelling at each other rather than reconciliation, which is just hey, love you, want to make this even better. Here's how we do that. I didn't see that third door, which was we can get our needs met and I cannot attack you and we can figure out the intersection of making us both happy.
It's fun that you say that because I've had this experience where I've heard from a relationship therapist. In every relationship, there's one person that thinks it's a rubber ball and the other person that thinks it's a crystal ball. So one person thinks you can throw this relationship around the room, you can subject it to volatility, and it can still have underlying security. And other folks who feel like you're getting into a fight and it's over. Right, it's going to shatter. And apparently there might be something okay about people having different approaches to that. I don't know what happens with 2 crystal balls. Any thoughts on that
so
and maybe that evolution on how did you become the kind of person that discovered the third door? What changed in your life? What experiences did you go through that you discovered that door?
Well, I remember being on a trip with my best friend And I mentioned something that she had said that bothered me, which we were in Portugal together. And it was like a little thing, but I felt like I needed to say it for me to like still stay authentic in the relationship.
Wait, now can you tell us? Since it's you.
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to think. Oh, I think I was like sharing like a crush or something. And she was like, you're in love with them. I know you're in love with them. Don't deny it to yourself. You're in love with them. And I was like, I think I just need the room to like figure that out on my own. Anyway, so I tried to tell her that. And she was just like, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. Everything that I do is wrong. And we had this moment where both of us might have escalated. And I de-escalated. And I was like, friend, I'm sorry I've made you feel that way. I maybe haven't been good about telling you all the things that you're doing right. Because most of the things you say make me feel lovely and make me feel great. It's just like this little thing, right? And so that was like whoosh for her, right? That like we could still love each other even when we're upset with each other. And it was just for me reading research that I was like, this is possible. Let me try it. And so that created all these ripple effects where she started doing that with her friendships and I started doing it with my friendships more. And now like literally if we're like, she like stayed over at my place. She lived together in my one bedroom for months. And like, it was like every day we'd be like, hey, like just checking in, like anything I can do to like make you more comfortable or like anything I do like affect you. And so now it's like very defanged. It feels like a lot more benign and it just feels so beautiful to not have, like, I think human beings are sensitive. Little things hurt us all the time. It feels so beautiful to not have that accrue and just to be like, all right, let's clear it out. Because now I feel like the most harm is caused when I have people in my life who are upset with me and use it against me, and they don't even give me a chance to repair. That feels so much more harmful than the person that gives me the chance, right? And it's like being held guilty without even going before the jury, where you can't necessarily share your side. Yeah. And that, like, now it's like the lack of directness that just feels so much more painful than the person that's like, hey, let me just bring this up here in a kind way. Still.
I have to ask, was that Portugal moment where you were the aggrieved person and got through it after the New York moment? Were you aggrieved the other person? Was that an incorporated learning? Portugal was first.
So I wanted Portugal for New York, but we did not get there.
Turns out the other person wasn't like you.
Yeah, we weren't on the same page.
So tell us, how do we make friends?
Woo! Okay. The first thing that I see is that people are just like, friendship happens organically. Take a very passive approach to making friends. That is not how friendship happens. People that think that friendship just happens without effort are lonelier over time, is what the studies show. You have to make an effort to make friends. What does that mean? You find someone you like here. Hey, I'd love to exchange contact information. It was great to talk to you. Following up with them, like making that effort. And I think we're also afraid of rejection.
What if they give you their email and not their phone number? Is that the first sign? Follow me on Insta. Okay.
It could be or it could not be, right? Yeah. I try to, and that's the other tip I share to make friends, because we're so afraid of rejection, but the research finds that when people interact, they underestimate how liked they are by other people. So I try to tell people to assume that people are going to like you based off of research that finds when people are told that they'll be liked, they become more likable, friendlier, warmer, more open. And when you are afraid of rejection, you are rejecting people. You are closed off, you're withdrawn, you're not engaging with anyone. And so I think assuming people like you is like also really key.
Let's talk about that one. Is that because most of us just have resting bitch face, or why do other people think that others are not interested in them?
Yeah. Well,
tell us about that research.
So now this is like for my next book, really.
Talk about that.
So my next book is on the science of feeling secure in yourself. And I realize how hard it is to assume that people will like you, because assuming that they don't protects you, right? And who wants to give up safety? And so something I found in my book is like, what makes people insecure? It's not necessarily about how you look now or how much money you make. It's about your memories. You've experienced rejection, neglect, abuse, and how our memories work is they predict the future. And so your fear that this person's going to reject you, they don't really like you, that can come from a memory. Maybe you were bullied at some point, maybe in your family, you didn't necessarily feel loved in the way that you want. And so because our memories are always predicting that, it's adaptive to feel insecure, right? Because if that's going to happen again, why would you want to feel so good about yourself? And then you're going to fall further when that eventually happens.
Yeah.
And so this next book is really about...
What's it called?
Secure-ish. secure-ish, because I talk about it's important not to be fully secure, because then you alienate the parts of yourself that aren't and fundamentally commit to those parts of you what made them insecure in the first place. And so I talk about this theory I came across called memory reconsolidation theory, which is when you revisit your memories, you can actually change them. And I don't know if you all have heard of like inner child work, where you go back to a memory as your adult self and you tell that child in that memory all the things they need to hear. Maybe you're being bullied and you say like, everything about you is worthy and everything about you is beautiful, and the way they're treating you has no bearing of who you are.
And do I need to do drugs to do the inner child work, or is that in therapy? How do I do the inner child work if I want to?
Buy my next book. Therapy does help with that.
Okay.
That is like revisiting a memory all the time. My friend would do it in this tiny way where she would remember these moments where she would cringe, and she would say to herself, I love you. I love you. Every time a cringy memory came up for her.
To herself.
Yeah, to herself. Like, I love you. I love you. I love you. And so what it is really going on is like, I think in general for your mental health, what's really helpful is to engage in what's called dual processing, which means a part of you experiencing the pain and another part of you realize is not in pain. It doesn't encapture all of you. And that part of you that's not in pain can then say to that part of you that's in pain exactly what you need to hear. Your feelings are valid. It's okay. You're going to be okay. I'm here with you.
There was an SNL skit about that, right? Maybe y'all remember it.
Tell us about it.
Well, the person was standing in the mirror. Gosh darn it, people like me. I was seeing some research. That affirmations in the mirror actually help folks.
Yeah.
Tell us about how to affirm ourselves without feeling like we're cringy ourselves.
No,
like
it's
that
a
would
great
be a
question.
hurdle for me to jump over to talk to myself in a mirror. But
well, okay, here's the thing. Research on affirmation, it does help, but for some people it makes them feel worse. Because if you really feel unlovable and you're saying you're worthy of love, it just triggers that part of you who's like, no, I'm not, no, I'm not, no, I'm not, right? It feels like an identity crisis. This is like people that struggle to take compliments because they feel like now there's all this pressure for me to live up to that, and I'm really not that. And so this is super uncomfortable. You're trying to make me unsafe because you're taking away all my defense mechanisms against this. And so it's about what you can actually receive, right? Like if you're like, I'm the best, people love me, that's too much for you. Like some of my students will say, people could like me. That feels a lot more acceptable. You know, if there's a possibility that there's a possibility that this could go right. It's all about you and your unique nervous system. Like, what do you uniquely need to hear that would feel curative for you?
So we're pulling on the thread now. The first misperception, whatever it is that someone isn't interested in me, maybe in an initial conversation.
Yeah.
What's next on that journey to how we make a friend?
Yeah. So
let's assume they're interested first.
Yeah, let's assume they're interested.
Now what?
Ask them to hang out. Anything that generates exclusivity, which means I have experiences with you that I don't have with other people. So I'm asking you to hang out. I'm engaging in conversation with you, any of those things. But really, you need to have a repeated interaction over time. So the reason friendship is so hard in adulthood is Rebecca G. Adams, the sociologist, says in childhood, we have repeated unplanned interaction and shared vulnerability. I see you every day and we're vulnerable. That's school for us, right? That was recess. That was lunch. In adulthood, we don't really have that. Like maybe
kids are vulnerable with each other?
Yeah, kids are.
No, tell us about that. I have a 4-year-old and I think I know what you're getting at, but
yeah, because kids don't really know. I think like we learn over time how to create these masks. Like,
how to hide.
Yeah, we learn how to hide over time. Like kids are really good at knowing how to be genuine. They haven't learned anything else. But yeah, I think in adulthood, like at work, we're often not vulnerable, even if we are seeing people every day. Maybe pie is different. So asterisk there. And so we need to recreate that in our lives. I think it sounds like pie is doing that. Where can we find repeated unplanned interaction and shared vulnerability? For me, like I've created all these social groups, me and the author groups, where like every quarter we like talk about the issues that we're having as authors. I've created like monthly dinner groups with friends, or if you join something, like you join a league or something, that's why that's really powerful because you have repeated unplanned interaction. But I will say there's this phenomenon in the psychology world called the mere exposure effect, which is the more familiar we are to each other, the more we like each other. That's why the repeatedness really helps. It just makes sense. I learned that you're not a threat. I feel closer to you, you feel closer to me. But the issue I think we often have is we go to one happy hour, we feel uncomfortable, we're like never again. And that discomfort is not a sign to eject from the connection. It's a sign that you're in the process of connecting, right? And so I think it's also important to reframe discomfort is part of the process rather than a sign to escape the process.
And tell us about being in that environment. where you've put yourself out there.
Yeah.
You're at something.
Yeah.
Maybe you had a person you came with, they leave, or maybe you came solo, someone's not there yet. How do you deal with that inner second grader that comes out? What do you recommend to someone in that environment on how they take the next step?
Yeah. So what I realize about people that are secure is they not only don't try to avoid their feelings, they actually try to move toward their feelings, right? Mm-hmm. But that's not the only thing. It's not that they acknowledge their feeling, but every time they acknowledge a feeling, they comfort themselves. And so just acknowledging your feelings, you'd be like, oh my God, like, I feel this way. I feel threatened. I feel anxious, right? But like, it's recognizing that anxiety. Maybe you put a hand on your chest and you say, it's going to be okay. Like, people might like you. You kind of give yourself a little bit of the talk you need to kind of come back down and interact in this environment. Another way to do it is to remind yourself of everything that makes you a great friend, right? We all have that list, and remind yourself of that. Prime yourself in that way before you go into the interaction.
Do you have to have like good parents or something? Like how does you become someone that, I don't know, affirms your own emotions?
Yeah. I think we need to learn how to be in pain. I think a lot of us, we've never been taught how to be in pain. We've only been taught to escape it, to pretend it's not there, and not to acknowledge the pain, and be your own internal supporter. Like that it has been for me, revolutionary. Instead of me saying, I shouldn't feel that way, I should be ashamed of myself, it's not okay that I feel that way, push it away and move on. I'm having a feeling, I need a moment to go inward and acknowledge that and like offer myself internal repair.
And did you have some pain that you experienced at some point that helped you work through it, whether something from childhood, or you mentioned doing some research about loneliness?
Yeah.
And then maybe applying the research to yourself?
Yeah.
Tell us about
that. Okay. So I got my dream job. I was a professor on the tenure track, which in the academic world is like the most high status form of professorship.
And early on too, right?
Yeah. I was like 26 at a Research One institution.
You were 26 and you got a tenure track job.
Yeah. A Research One institution, high research impact institution. And I was doing research on like related to loneliness. And I had this like questionnaire that assessed loneliness. And I didn't feel like I fit in with my colleagues. I didn't feel like they knew me. I felt like such an outlier. And I was young. I was the only Black woman. And I didn't think I was lonely because I was around people every day. But the questionnaire asked me things like, do I feel known by people? Do I feel authentic around them? And I was like, inauthenticity is a form of loneliness? I didn't know that. I'm lonely. Oh my goodness. And so I realized in that moment that I was actually lonely. I realized that even having the best possible job could not make up for feeling horrible in a culture. Like if it's not a culture fit, it's not a purpose fit for me. Yeah. It was very hard for me to like, now I teach, which I guess as a professor is like lower status.
Versus research.
Yeah. And I'm on the tenure track. But I also realized that like status can rob us of ourselves because we end up doing what's high status instead of what actually makes us feel passion and happiness and joy. And now I'm like, so I ended up leaving that job after a series of, events. And now I couldn't be happier professionally. I love everything I do.
How long from the realization to leaving?
I needed someone, and this is what I wish I didn't need, but I did. Even for writing Platonic, I needed someone to give me permission. So I had a mentor. She wrote While All the Black Kids Sing Together in the Cafeteria. Great book. Very successful. And I told her about Platonic and she was like, just write it. I was like, just write it. Yeah, just write it. Just write it? Yeah, you could just do it. And I was like, what do you mean just do it? Yeah, just write it. Do it. I needed that vote of confidence. And then I called my advisor crying one day. I don't remember what was happening on the faculty. I think it was like, we were like short on budget and we pay these PhD students at a level below the poverty rate. And we were like, let's just stop paying the students. And I was like, I cannot get around that ethically. Like, I'd rather you take my salary than like not pay these students for making $12,000 a year. And so I'm crying to my professor, feeling like so alienated, so isolated that I'm the only one having these reactions. And she was just like, you can leave. And I was like, I can leave? And she was like, yeah, you can leave. And I was just like, oh my God, okay. Like, this is what I just needed to hear. It's what I felt. And you gave me permission, full permission to feel it. But I feel like the healing work is not needing permission anymore.
And how did you meet this gem of a woman? And what's her name?
Karen O'Brien, my PhD advisor, and we're still friends.
That's amazing. And was there vulnerable disclosure there? I'm always curious about like mentor-mentee relationships.
Oh,
I feel like
gosh.
I've become friends with some people who I considered mentors, and that's like an honor.
Oh,
Tell us about
man.
that mentorship relationship. And
I think, I mean, after I definitely had a lot of struggles related to being like the only Black faculty and feeling very constrained in like what I could share or like how that informed my experience of things, because the faculty would get really mad at like Black students who tried to push back with some of their curriculum. And so then I felt like, oh my God, if I push back, I'm going to be perceived this way. So it felt kind of like a minefield, and I didn't know how to navigate it. And like,
this was for your PhD?
This was when I was at the job.
Okay.
And I was able to tell Karen like about all of this and how isolated I felt and how I didn't know how to navigate things. And
Karen taught, sorry to interrupt, Karen taught there too? Or a
no,
different
she
school?
was she taught my PhD
Where you got your
program.
degree. Got it.
And this is where I was teaching. And it was just really helpful to be vulnerable about that. And for have someone to say like, yeah, how you feel is valid. It's okay. I think shame is like really feeling like you're the only one with a sense of reality. And this is so healing when someone says like, you're not the only one. Like I would feel the same way.
And something so special in there, that nugget of having a mentor and having friends who exist outside of the culture that you're in.
Yeah.
So someone can be more objective, less codependent. They can kind of call it like they see it versus someone who's in it.
Yeah.
That can be beautiful too, but it's different.
Yeah, it was.
You brought up identity.
Yeah.
Tell us about your parents, your child. Where'd you grow up? Tell us about that.
So we were just talking because we're both biracial, multiracial. I don't know. My mom's from Haiti and my dad is from Italy. They met in Brooklyn, and I grew up in Brooklyn a little bit, but then Staten Island. I have to put in that Brooklyn a little bit so I sound a little cooler. Grew up. I lived in Italy a little bit when I was younger, and to like kind of meet my family there, and then went to NYU. And then soon after went to Maryland for my PhD.
And then what about that identity formation? White dad, Black mom, both immigrants.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think, understanding like Blackness was really pivotal for me, and was like pivotal in my writing too, because, I think I had to grapple with the ways that like, we're not just acting based off our individual behaviors. Like we're all in these systems that are pushing us to act in certain ways, right? And I think really systemically about friendship too, just like I do about racism and how that impacts how we act and behave. And so, for example, like in Platonic, I talk about how like we didn't used to have loneliness. Loneliness was a word for the state of being alone rather than the pain of it. Because you were always around other people before like industrialization. You lived with your families. You were in these communities, right? All the time. And now people move a lot, which contributes to deterioration. And forget about like cell phone use. I mean, that has really changed the nature of connection. And so we're caught up like in these systems. And I think it's just so helpful to remember that, because if we don't, we're like, it's my fault. Like I'm lonely because something is wrong with me, not because it's actually the norm to be lonely right now. So maybe something's not wrong with everyone. Maybe we need to think about what's happening in our larger culture to make this true.
You teach college kids now, and you're talking about smartphones, dumb phones, whatever they're called. Any learnings on technology and friendship, technology and loneliness?
Oh
Any
my gosh,
insights?
they're so fascinating. All the insights they give me. Like, first of all, that phones are a middleman between our friendship. And sometimes your phone use reflects who you are as a friend, and sometimes it doesn't. And we need to know when the middleman has veracity and when it doesn't, right? Because sometimes assume you're not texting me back because you're not interested in it as a friend, but maybe you're just a really bad texter. The middleman does not represent you. That's like from one of my students, Zico. And they also say things like, well, there's this way that like social media is so permanent. Anything that you post could come back for you. And that makes us fear rejection in the world so much more, because everything feels more weighty now. When I do any sort of interaction, like I take that same mindset into my interactions, like everything feels like more high stakes. And so there is this way that like the virtual world has hijacked the perception of the actual world in terms of our level of connection, or even things like if I know you on like a virtual chat or on like a group chat, I might have to provide you emotional support, but I'll never have to, show up at the hospital when you're sick. And I think that has really deteriorated the kind of more instrumental supportive friendship, me doing things for you, me showing up when you need, me helping you move, right? That feels like it's a lot less normal because it's not normal in the virtual world.
Anything we missed from platonic? I know there's a lot in there, but are there any gems or things percolating that are germane to this where you would say, oh, let me share this other thing with you?
Yeah. You know, I feel like I was saying my college students, they fear that they're always fearing I'm coming off as too much. You know, I shouldn't reach out. I'm going to come off as needy. I'm going to come off as clingy. But what makes someone likable is that they like people. People love people that like them. People love people that show interest in them. Anything that you can do to show someone that you like or value them is solidifying the connection. And that is even saying what you said was so meaningful. I'm still thinking about it. Like, that was so insightful. Or like, I am so happy for you. And that's really important. I talk about what's called diagnostic moments, which means diagnostic moments are moments that disproportionately impact our view of the overall health of the friendship. And these are moments of high emotion because we remember things when they trigger high emotion, both bad and good.
Yeah.
So how are you responding when your friend's at their lowest? Maybe they're going through a divorce. Yeah. Maybe they are a caretaker, but also when they get that promotion, are you like, that is amazing. I need to celebrate you. Like, showing up in those small moments is so important.
And how do you become someone that loves people? Like I was telling you before, I love people so much. My wife jokes that I have a low bar for people. And then she had this like, well, what does that mean about me? And I was like, I don't know. What if you're one of those people that doesn't like people? Like, you can see what you don't like. You're maybe more discerning, and that serves you well in some ways. How do you become a person that maybe is more open to what you might like about someone that you're just meeting or someone that you've known for a long time?
I'm going to ping pong this back because you just identified yourself as someone who likes people.
I don't know why. I just think there's something great about everyone. I really do. And that belief has served me well in life, but I don't know where it came from.
Do you think people are fundamentally good?
I do believe that. What about you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. And I was listening to this podcast yesterday, and it was like telling people to, I don't know, they're talking about like spirituality and consciousness and like, make sure you enjoy that even when you don't. And I think it's almost like attending to the layers of experience that helps me like people, because like, even if there's a part of you I struggle with, there's many layers of experience. And so I can see in this other layer, I really love you. In this other layer, like, you know, I feel close to you. In this other layer, like, I think that you're really awesome. And so like thinking about our experience as more lateral and dimensional, I think helps you love people more.
I love that. I love all of you. Who's got a question? So there's a question from the audience around what is that first step that you take with someone?
Yeah. My first piece of advice is if there's someone you're connecting with, reach out within 24 hours. 24 hours, you have to create that boundary so that you actually do it. My second piece of advice is play to your strengths. Like, if you're not a good, like, I have friends, I cannot get them to text me back, but if I respond to their Instagram stories, they're like, ha ha ha, emoji, emoji, emoji. And I'm just like, oh, I just need to reach out to you on Instagram, apparently, right? And so what is your preferred platform? And it's hard, but you can even be like, oh, like, I'm a phone call person, or I like to leave voice notes if someone asks me a complicated question. And I'm just like, I really do not want to text all of this. WhatsApp, like maybe it's LinkedIn, where you're like sending a message on LinkedIn. Like, what is your strength? What makes you feel least exhausted? And can you try to use that when connecting with people?
I actually have a related question personally, and then I'm going to go back to the crowd. When you do make that bid, you've met someone intriguing. Let's say you got their phone number, or you're DMing on Instagram, or hopefully not emailing. Is there a better bid than another one? You know, is it a little bit lower stakes to invite them to something that's in a group setting?
Yeah.
Or to invite them to do the thing you're doing again?
Yeah.
Versus kind of the bigger jump to one-on-one where people might be more selective with their time? Is there any research or any insight that you have around that?
That makes me think about equity theory. And equity theory is that like people actually prefer when you like them, like kind of like at the same level that they like you. And I think you can like them more, but not too much more, right? Yeah. And so like if you are one, they're like, oh, like I don't really know about this connection yet. And you're like, let's hang out every day. Like that might really overwhelm them. But that's just really hard to know because that can really differ depending on each person. And so I would say, like, don't get too much in your head about it and just do it and send the bid out and see what happens. Because that's really the only way that you know, is like the trial and error of doing it. And just remember, like, I think when it comes to initiation, you're a success if you initiate, not if the other person responds, because you're not in control of their behavior. So how can you judge yourself for it? So just by reaching out, you have already become better at connecting with people.
Yeah, I had a funny one. So I dealt with untreated, unmedicated bipolar for 16 years. And I didn't even know that what that meant was there were times where I was really in the mix with my friends and times where I went dark, which is sort of obvious in retrospect. And actually all but one of my friends had divorced me for that, but I didn't know.
Yeah.
Because I'm the kind of person that when I'm feeling really good, I like everyone. And if I'm feeling depressed, I'm checked out anyway.
Yeah.
So I didn't know I'd been friend dumped by like a dozen people.
Wow.
And the one friend who I've kept, and I don't know, I'm at a stage in my life, maybe it's married with a kid, where I have like one person who I feel fully known by, and that feels fulfilling on some level. And then there's something I'm wanting for as well, which, you know, is part of why we're here with my new day job. So it is interesting to think about that if the equity comes and goes. Any advice on that? You know, sometimes someone's in a life moment where they're busy.
Yeah.
Or what happens when they get in a relationship and have no time for you? Back to your friend's boyfriend. Is it okay?
Yeah.
How do you navigate people being in different seasons of what they're looking for and their availability?
Well, generally, when you look at long distance friendships and the ones that keep, it's the people that see them as flexible and not fragile. So there's going to be seasons, there's going to be periods where we talk less, periods where I talk more. And I think it's helpful to give grace, but I think you also have to ask yourself, do I have the capacity for grace? Because if the answer is no, and you're overextending yourself trying to like, I'm going to still try with this friend, or they're really not fulfilling my needs and I'm still going at it, eventually you're going to withdraw from the relationship. So taking care of like your own needs and your own reality helps the relationship too.
That's awesome. Let's go here. Hi, Olive.
My friends and I have been talking about how we've been experiencing lorks at like a really high rate over the last 2 years, and trying to better understand why people are showing up that way. Like, what do we think is causing that?
Any trends or research or what's up with that, do you think?
I don't really know. I mean, the only thing that I could suspect is like I said, the way that the like digital world comes into the physical world, and like a lot of our digital connections are like kind of lurking, like scrolling. I feel connected to you in this parasocial way. And that can kind of breed into like, I'm almost scrolling in this actual interaction here.
Parasocial.
Parasocial.
What does that mean?
Parasocial means a one-way
Paranormal.
Relationship where you feel close to people, but they don't even really know you. Like with celebrities and stuff.
That's a good book title.
Favorite social.
Your next book.
Yeah, that's my only hypothesis. I mean, we have been getting more narcissistic over time and insecure over time. And yeah, the trends haven't been good. But
When does Secure-ish come out, by the way?
probably in about 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Get on the wait list. Let's go to the hat here.
Oh, hey, I thought everything you're saying is really amazing. I really was curious. Anything that you have is there anything at all that may have surprised you while writing Platonic? Now, this doesn't have to necessarily be in the vast knowledge that we have in relationships and friendships.
Yeah.
But just taking on a new role as author or creative.
Oh.
Anything that.
Okay.
Yeah. The question is there anything that has surprised you
Yeah.
recently as you've been writing
As like an
Platonic?
author and a creative. So I started out as an academic writing Platonic, not knowing how to write in a way that would engage people. And at some point, my agent was like, I don't know if you need a book doctor. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but that sounds really bad. And I felt like I was really failing. And I didn't know what he needed from me. And I think as a creative, what I did was find the formula, which means there were books that were successful that I wanted to be like Platonic to be like. And I spent hours poring over them and analyzing, what are they doing here? They're creating tension here. They're saying things where everyone thinks this way, but they're saying it's actually the opposite. That surprise tends to bring people in. And so I spent so many hours. It wasn't just about having helpful content, but knowing how to share it in a way that brings people in. and like studying great art over and over and over again. And I still do that. I still like read nonfiction books and I'm like, what is engaging here? Let me break it down. And how can I then incorporate that into my own like creative writing? And the other thing I'll say is like, okay, so I was in LA, and do you all remember Hanson? Like, Bob? Okay. So I met Hanson's agent, and he was like, yeah, Hanson is still performing like a couple months a year. Like they live in these big mansions in Oklahoma, and then they're like doing these performances for like 2 months, and then they live off of those 2 months. And I was like, I want Platonic to be my bop. Like, I just want to be able to live off of its coattails for the rest of my life, and then just like live a life that's just like whatever I find meaningful. And Platonic, I don't know if it's like bop level, but it has opened up so many doors for me and made my life so much easier and made it so that I don't have to do work that I don't want to do. And so do one thing really, really well. Put your all into that one thing, that one product, that one item, instead of trying to do many things in a mediocre way. Part of that is finding the formula, right? Part of that is getting feedback. But doing one thing as a creative really, really well can make your life so much easier. Find an mbop.
Find my mbop.
Yeah.
You mentioned books that have been inspiring you. Tell us about something you've been reading recently that's having an impact, and maybe one of your favorites.
Oh gosh, yeah.
From when you were writing Platonic or before that.
I have been reading, remember the hierarchy of needs guy, Abraham Maslow? So he has these like secret journals where he's like, self-actualization is not the top of the hierarchy. So it's like, Maslow, what is at the top of the hierarchy? And he basically says, actualizing yourself, fully becoming authentic, means that you deeply connect to everyone and everything around you. And it is a vehicle to transcend the self and then commit to a cause greater than you, which you can do in a more powerful way when you find that authenticity and and things resonate with you and they provoke you and they move you more deeply than ever before. And so self-transcendence is actually the end of the hierarchy. He wrote in his private journals before he died.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God.
How did you have his private journals? How did you get those?
Articles. I've been like interviewing different academics on the self, and they sent me like these articles where these researchers like looked at his private journals and like what he said. And I'm just like, wow, like here I was trying to get people to be secure. And that's just like the beginning.
That's awesome. Let's go over here.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk to you because I'm in school to be a therapist. So
Oh,
so
cool.
many things to say, get my brain juice. But I love that you commented on how perhaps when we're triggered by something, perhaps that a friend has done or a partner, that sometimes we find it easier to jump ship than try to navigate it together. I want to kind of ask you some tips and tricks that you feel we could use that when we are triggered, when we are in a situation where we really care for someone, we do want to continue that connection, but perhaps we are triggered or turned off by things that they do, or triggers that they have. There's some maybe brain hacks that we can utilize or things that we can use to.
Yeah, so the question from the crowd is some tips or tricks for when we're feeling aggrieved in a friendship or something's going awry.
Slow it down. Like a trigger is like every emotion happening at once. Needing it out, slowing it down, just pausing, not acting when you're at a place of triggeredness. Like I think of it as like kneading out the dough so that you can attend to each of the emotions that are tumbled up into those triggers and start like pulling apart the thread. I think that is really big. I think the kind of like dual processing self-compassion work around triggers, like I think when we feel triggers, often we feel shame because someone has shamed us for that reaction if it's become a trigger. But like making internally, like finding a place within or internally that's like anti-shame, which to me is like when I'm triggered now, I try to be like, thank you so much for communicating with me that you were in distress, like trying to tell that part of me. Because really it's like all these triggers are like young children within us who like didn't get their needs met. Would I do that to 5-year-old me? Then why am I doing it to 33-year-old me? Just being like, you're bad for having that reaction, you know? Like instead it's thank you so much for telling me. Like, I don't want you to take that on alone. Like, hey, I'm here. Like, I really think just like we pause and take time for our physical health, if I'm having a reaction, I need to go spend time with that reaction. I need to not just be like, let me get to the next thing in my day. I need to set aside 10 minutes to be like, this is the reaction I'm having. Let me offer myself comforting.
I love this question and answer. It reminds me of a book I read recently about plane crashes that says in every plane crash, there's 3 ingredients: a maintenance problem, a mechanical issue, bad weather, and then pilot error. And the research has shown that when you're a pilot and you're freaking out because there's a mechanical issue and a weather-related issue, you have to learn to keep flying without reacting.
Wow.
So it's sort of like, this is bad. We might all die.
Yeah.
I'm going to be responsible. And my job is to do nothing until I know what to do. So just keep flying. I guess
that.
that's the advice
That
for
is
friendships
it. That is
as well. Back there with the cool Letterman jacket.
Thanks. Love the panel. So we hear the word loneliness epidemic a lot.
Yeah. Yep.
But I feel like the word loneliness is very, very negative. People hear it like, hey, I'm not that kind of person. I'm not lonely.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's like a way we're avoid like to accept our feeling. So
Yep.
if both of you have a chance to redefine the definition of loneliness, instead of like people hear, oh, that's a bad word, but more like, oh, it's time for me to work on it. Or I'm stuck in this like big society problem. It's not my fault. How would you guys define or redefine this term?
Well, I think the simple answer is like it's the subjective state that you're uncomfortable with aloneness at a given time. But the more complicated answer is, when I look at the research on loneliness, it is not just a feeling, it is a worldview. When we are lonely, it fundamentally changes how we perceive the world. Because if you were lonely in an African savanna, evolutionarily, then you're in danger. And so when we are lonely, we are hyper vigilant for threat. Our sleep is poorer because we're waking up and engaging in micro wakes when we're looking around for threat and then going back to sleep.
Whoa.
We think we're rejected when we're not being rejected. This is why loneliness ends up being self-reinforcing, because we see threat, harm. It's so hard to initiate. It's harder to initiate with someone else when you're lonely. Much harder, much harder, because your brain is so attuned for threat when you're lonely and you're thinking, I'm being rejected. And the need for safety comes above the need for connection. Loneliness is related to wanting to withdraw from people, which feels weird because, right, you want connection. But the people that are able to overcome that loneliness and find connection again, it is a bit about an internal destigmatizing. And so people that are saying to themselves, they have what's called like unstable attributions, which means it's not about something stable about me. I'm lonely because something's wrong with me. People just don't like me. They make an unstable attribution. I'm lonely in this moment because I moved to this city. I'm in a bad mood. Things feel hard right now. Things will get better. Or the people that are really end up being lonely, they have stable attributions about other people. You can't trust people. People are out to get you because you can't change other people. And so there's really no way out then. And the people that get out of it are like, even if that person's in a bad mood, maybe next time it'll go better. And so it is really like optimism and hope, I would say, more than anything, that like, just because I'm lonely in this moment doesn't mean that this is my destiny, that allows us to pull out of that state of loneliness.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that. What I am going to do is get some wallpaper with elephants and antelope, because I didn't know that when I wake up in the middle of the night, it's like I'm looking for lions and hyenas.
Yeah.
And just be like, oh, it's just elephants and antelope.
There you go.
A couple of quick questions that I love to ask to close it out. Do you believe in destiny?
Oh man, this is me reading this book on consciousness. That's basically like when people make decisions, you can read at the neural level that they'll make that decision before they actually make the decision. Their brain is reacting before they are conscious of them making the decision. And also like really interesting research that like when people like there was a study where people shared a mouse with someone else, and that other person who was sharing the mouse, like a computer mouse.
Okay.
But in separate rooms.
Whoa, they're getting weird with mice in these labs.
Yeah, and so they both controlled the like mouse clicker, but with different little mouse, I don't know, the actual physical mouses. And so that person basically moved the mouse to like a certain item. And then they'd ask you, why did you pick that item? And you'd be like, oh, this is why I picked that item, when actually you were forced into that item. And so like our consciousness is always making up stories to make meaning out of these things that an underlying part of us is already wanting to do. It's like when I go to the refrigerator and I look for food and I'm like, I don't even know how I got here. Or I'm scrolling on my phone. I don't know how I got here. And so that book on consciousness, I think it's called Consciousness, A Brief History of, I don't know, something. But yeah, it's really pushed me to be like, I thought we had free will, but it seems like our consciousness is just justifying something that something more underlying wanted to do anyway all the time. I mean, that's kind of what this book is arguing.
Do you know who the author is?
I think her name's Annika Barker. I'm probably messing
We'll
up.
get it
Someone
in
can
the
Google it.
in the podcast notes. Another one that I love. What is the thing you most believe that the fewest people you know believe?
Oh man. I mean, I don't know why it's felt. I remember complaining about my friend who like only talked to her partner and would kind of dump me. And my other friend was like, if we really knew ourselves, we would know that we need an entire community. And I was like, you're exactly right. Like we always have needed an entire community, you know? And so I really believe, and I think I'm just like so much more fluid about relationships. Like I think there's romance in friendship. Romance isn't always sexual. It's like, I'm passionate about you. I want to spend all my time with you. I'm so excited about you. So I see relationships a lot more fluid, and I see like community beyond like the individual as so necessary. I think like particularly in these times, and that might seem, I don't know, a little bit obvious, but there's a lot of context in which I feel like it's not for us.
Yeah, and last one. What is the kindest thing that anyone has ever done for you?
Oh, man. I really think kindness means so much when you're at your most vulnerable. And so I have always had issues like growing up, my father was kind of angry. And so when people are angry around me or conflict happens, I am so overwhelmed and I really like struggle again with people when people are angry. That's like my own past traumas. And my friend got like really angry over something political, and I sort of like subtly disagreed with her, but then she got angrier, and she was living with me at the time. And I got so overwhelmed. I like went into a state of shutdown. I was like, I literally can't get off my couch. I don't know what's happening to me, but I know that I'm having a trauma reaction right now, and she's about to come home, and I am completely immobilized. And we were like in communication with each other. She's like, do you need me to not come? I can stay in a hotel tonight. And I was like, no, I'm just gonna like go out. Like we can talk tomorrow. And that whole, like we were so loving towards each other, even though I had been so deeply, deeply triggered. Like, and it was like, I just want you to know I love you even while I'm having this reaction. It was that dual reality thing that was happening. And so, you know, when we finally met up and I had like, it was like 2 days, I finally had gotten out of this like immobilization thing. And I said, you know, the conversation, she was just like, I want to hear about how I harmed you. And that was so big for me because I think before I would have thought that when someone like when someone harms you and I can tell that she didn't mean it and I can tell that she wasn't intentional, right? There's this way that I think we often want to be like, well, why are you having such a big reaction? Like, chill. And it was none of that. She was like, I want to understand your own reality here. And I knew that my reality was very subjective and I was reacting very uniquely based off my own past. But there was so much room for me to do that and for me to have that reaction and for her to say like, okay, like now I understand, like I don't want to trigger you like that anymore. And it felt like such an act of love for her to have that spaciousness for me.
Wow. You met your match there, friendship-wise, maybe?
That was the one from Portugal. We've come a long way.
Full circle.
We have come a long way.
Dr. Marissa Franco, I have some words of affirmation for you. You are a national treasure. And with all the translations of platonic, you are becoming an international treasure. I want to be your friend. I'm going to text you. It's okay if you don't write me back. Or you can just be honest and say you don't have room, but you said you got like 15 slots. So I'm hoping. And you know, what I loved about this is there is so much more to you beyond what you've already done. And hopefully Platonic has launched 1,000 ships. It certainly has made a difference in my day job with what we're doing at Pi. Can't wait for Securish and everything you're going to do. Let's give it up for Dr. Franco.
Thank you all so much. Thank you.